Good evening, everyone. Hello, hello. Hello. Welcome to the Renfrew branch of the Vancouver Public Library. My name is Taylor Lawton. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm a library technician here at the Renfrew branch. A note about this branch, so washrooms are located back through the library. Back out, there's the lobby that you came in. They're just next to the elevator. In the event of an emergency, hopefully not, please use this door here, only this door during an emergency, otherwise the alarm will sound. And back through the open doors. There's another emergency exit at the very back. The library, we're very responsible about emergencies and things. I am humbly thankful that I live and work on the unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh peoples. The Renfrew Ravine has always been a place that I've gone to for solace, comfort, and a sense of nature in the big city. I've marveled at what role it played in how the ravine looked before settlers came and covered it up. The work that the community has done to restore the ravine has been inspiring, and Still Moon has played a pivotal role in that work. It's an honor to have Still Moon Art Society here today as part of the Shedding Lights speaker series. Seeing the work of Still Moon in this community over the years has always made me feel hope and connection to our environment and my neighbors. Please join me in welcoming the Stewardship Programs Manager for Still Moon, Adrian Evan Daniel.
A quick thing about Still Moon. We're an arts organization that was started 20 years ago by Farmer Rosine, who believed that there was a connection with art and the environment, and so therefore many things have happened in Vancouver Ravine, as Thea has mentioned, and we're always looking for folks to get involved with the things that go on. The big events that happen throughout the year are the Repurposing Moon Festival that happens every September. This will be the 21st annual festival, so keep your eyes peeled for that. And then every couple of weeks we do hands-on environmental stewardship events, either here in the Ravine or at different locations around the Still Creek watershed, mainly in just not too far from here, Cornet Road. Is a section of Still Creek that was daylit, and we've been working to remove some invasive plants and plant some native species. And we're really happy with how things have been turning out, and it's all thanks to folks coming out and supporting the work. So you're all more than welcome to do that. And last but not least, we'd love to take the opportunity to thank the sponsors that helped fund this event. So we're thankful to the Habitat Conservation Trust Foundation and TDFEF, so that's TD Friends of the Environment, and the City of Vancouver Greenest City Grant. And without further ado, I'd like to present Sam Alder for our Shedding Lights series. Thank you so much. Thanks, Adrian.
Hello. Wow. It's so great to see everyone here. It's amazing. So I'm an industrial designer. I studied at Emily Clark, and as my final project there, I was working with Blackberry Brambles. So that was probably, I I graduated in 2020, so that was a while ago. And I continued to work since then. At the point that I left it when I left school, I had figured out how to process brambles and press them into a material which there was no additives to it. It was just straight Blackberry brambles, and this is a very physical presentation, obviously, for obvious reasons. So this area, a lot of this is representing where I was when I left school. So this bramble is harvested at projects like the ones that Still Moon Arts runs. I've also been working with Earth and Cleaner Society. They were actually the people who I was able to learn how to process brambles from them, starting with learning from their online videos of just showing how to do the manual process. I imagine most people here are familiar with what Blackberry brambles look like, but if you haven't identified one before. This is a really great example of what can happen when a site is left for a long time. So I don't know how old this would be, but yeah, this is the biggest one that I've ever cut. I'm sure many of you have also dug into bramble patches as well. The material I'm creating is coming from one particular part of the plant. So many people probably have processed the skins and gotten a long fiber from those for braiding, for making rope, that kind of thing. The layer that I'm working with is just one layer underneath. So I've cut a bramble open here, and you can see this wall is actually very similar to wood. It's lignocellulose. It's the same material that you get from trees, but just in a much lighter form. When you cut down a bramble this big, you don't need a truck to move it. You can just put it on the back of a bike and move it through the city. So starting from that realization that there was this woody material, I was like, there must be a way to, rather than taking a massive tree and cutting it into little bits, taking many, many little bits of bramble and putting them together. And the first process I developed in school was pretty successful at that. I was able to get this without any extra finishing. It comes out with quite a smooth surface. And yeah, definitely after the talk, please do come up and touch everything. There's nothing here off limits. But one of the problems that I encountered with this material was that as soon as water touched it, it would expand and disintegrate. And that's great if you want to compost it. I'm a big fan of that. But if you want it to stick together, hold together, and potentially be rained on and then still be a usable piece of material, I needed to figure out another step in the process. So I'm just going to take a peek at my notes. One of the places that I started, one of the reasons that I got really interested in this project is I was originally very interested in electricity and renewable energy. I was very curious about where we're going to get our electricity and how is this whole like renewable solar panels and wind turbines thing going to work. And as I looked into it more and more, I realized there's this massive problem that the solar panels, we figured them out, they're great. All these other infrastructure, we have really great solutions, but in order to make the most of each solar panel, in order to use the least amount of materials to get the most amount of electricity, there's actually a whole structure that it's great to put underneath the solar panel, which is a pan and tilt mechanism. And so you want your solar panel to follow the sun. And in order to do that right now, the existing solution is just take some aluminum or steel, concrete it into the ground, make a bunch of gears, a bunch of motors, and stick all that together with some electronics, which is also, again, another resource that you have to mine. All of those things come together, and you can get the most efficiency out of your solar panel. But if you extend that out and you look for, okay, how are we going to generate that much electricity that we can replace everything, you realize you can't make an aluminum or a steel solar tracker. You need something else. And where I ended up looking was a team from the University of Maryland was able to take regular wood from trees and densify it. And they found out that when they densify it, it actually develops a lot of properties more similar to metals, we're more familiar with in metals. So when you densify it using the process that they developed, the walls of the cellulose fibers collapse to the point where they fuse, and then at that point you develop a rigidity, which is very similar to steel, and you develop strength, which on a by weight basis is equivalent to titanium, which is great. It's like, okay, that's a great solution. But we also just can't cut as many trees as we want. We don't don't have the, what do you call it, the forestry practices to really approach that in a way where we know we're going to be good, we're going to be able to grow more trees than we use. We don't have that yet. And so this is a great solution for some things, but if we're going to use a bunch of wood for this, maybe we need to stop using wood in other places. Maybe we need to stop using steel in other places. And so my idea was, let's use Blackberry Bramble instead. And that was a big part of the inspiration for why I started getting into materials in general. So once I did start getting into that, what I figured out was a process for putting brambles together into larger pieces where, yeah, they are able to resist moisture, hold together, and come out looking like the objects you see in front of you. So I started with a mold, very simple mold. So I would stick different plant materials in here. I would soak them in different substances and see if they held together. And the whole time I was going back to scholarly papers and seeing what does the research say about how we do this process. And so the breakthrough kind of came when I realized that the thing that every like pulp and paper engineer will tell you, every person who is an engineer working with wood, is that they will tell you that the lignin is the glue of trees. And this is a really incorrect statement. And they say it because in order to make pulp and paper, you take the lignin out and then the material just kind of falls apart. And so if you look at it from that way, you realize you make the assumption that, yeah, okay, it's the glue because now we can disintegrate it really easily. But when you try and put it back in, it does not actually glue anything very well. And so what I started to put together was that there isn't one actual substance that glues wood together. The wood is made from many layers. Hi. No worries. Yeah, so what I started to realize from that was that the wood is not actually gluing itself together in any sense of how we think about gluing things together. What it's doing is growing many different networks, and all those networks are interlocking with each other. Every time a cell in a tree puts out a little bit of pectin, the pectin that forms the cell wall interlocks with multiple other layers. And so that's cellulose, that's lignin, that's tannin, that's all of these different things. And so the only way that you can actually get to a process that is anywhere equivalent to a natural growing process is you have to mimic what the plants are doing. You can't say, okay, we're going to throw a bunch of glue at it, because those glues, it was the wrong approach. And I was trying it for a very long time, and it kept not working. So the process that I've developed happens in many more steps than an engineer would like to be able to use, which is why I'm coming to all of you artists, because it's much more friendly to that. Just check my notes again. Yeah, okay. I wish I had a picture. This is probably the one section that I wish I had pictures for. My laptop walked away without me yesterday, so. Yeah. Great. So those many layers. Yeah, my process that I've developed happens in multiple stages. The first stage of the process is actually, well, after I've taken the skins off. So the skin of a blackberry plant, the skin of almost every plant has a waxy layer on it that stops any kind of substances coming in. So it's very, very great at that. If you could figure out how to clad the outside of a building in plant-like material, it would be incredible. That would be awesome. We'll figure that out later. But once you've gotten that skin layer off, which you can then give to somebody who likes to make paper or somebody who likes to make fabrics, and they can do something cool with it, this goes into a dye bath. And so that's why the color is so profoundly different from what you see on the plant. But that's not just an aesthetic choice. So the tannins that are in the dye bath, which are sourced from the skins as well. So by cooking the skins, you make a dye bath, and you get this sort of purplish color. But it's actually also functional. It's a part of the process of bonding the things together, because you need that extra layer of network that can interweave with all the other networks. If you don't have all of the networks, then you're trying to bond things that don't really want to weave with each other. You need another layer.
Is that a catalyst then?
I would describe it more like yes, kind of. It's offering more sites for other networks to bond with. So,
Lego at a distance.
sorry,
Lego at a distance.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Lego at a distance.
That is a great phrase, yes. Lego at a distance. Lego strung together and, yeah, networks. So that is one part of the process. And the next part of the process is I have to dry it. So when you dry it, the tannins from the dye bath will actually condense with each other. So there's a process in many different fields, parts of chemistry, called condensation, which is when two molecules lock to each other and they put out a little bit of water. And that kind of process tends to be reversible with water, but it's very slow to reverse with water. Or it can be highly resistant to moisture attack. After it's dried, the color actually gets darker, which is an indication of that condensation process. The molecules that form that layer, that part of the network, have become stronger, and in the process, they darken. After that, it goes into an agar bath. So that's the major additive here, is I'm taking agar, which is sourced from certain types of seaweeds, available pretty much around the world. Most commonly, the ones that I'm able to get my hands on from the grocery store are coming from Southeast Asia or South America. So it's not a 100% local process yet. Gonna try and work on that. But it goes into the agar bath, and the agar soaks into the pores of the fiber. And that's important later when the pressing process happens. After the agar bath, again, take it out and dry it. So the setup that I'm using for drying at every stage is I'm using a dehumidifier. And what's amazing about dehumidifiers is they're incredibly energy efficient. So they can pull moisture out of any air using unbelievably small amounts of energy. And so I'm actually pulling out all of the water and putting it back into the beginning of the process. So at each stage, water goes into the fiber and then comes out afterwards, and I just put it back in the dye bath, put it back in the agar bath. So right now I'm able to run a closed loop in terms of water. I'm not having to have wastewater, which, yeah, I wish more industrial processes operated that way, because the amount of energy is substantial, It's not free, but it's worth it.
And how long do they go into the dye bath for?
That's a great question. So I'm using a dye bath which is room temperature. So it's staying in there for about 2 days. And it'll go much, much faster if you keep it heated, but that's another energy use. So after it's soaked in the agar, the seaweed is dried. After it's dried, then I'm adding the most active chemical ingredient, which is the one that I'm starting using now is one that I can make myself locally. So I'm using oxidized sucrose, which is a very clean chemistry technique that has been developed quite recently by a team in India. So they're just using hydrogen peroxide as the oxidizer, and you can put in glucose. Right now I'm using store-bought sugar. Eventually I'd like to find a local sugar source. So I think that would probably be blackberries would be a great source. There's always more things to do. And so that is a really simple process as well. That's just a soaking process. To get it in there takes maybe an hour to soak in, and then it goes back in the dryer again. And at that point, all of the key ingredients are there. There's the multiple layers, and then they've all been activated by adding that last ingredient, which is the oxidized sucrose. And once it's dry again, it then can go into this beast, which is the mold, which I didn't clean out, which is the mold for the legs of this table. So this is machined to be 2 parts which come together under a great deal of pressure. Again, after the talk, check these things out. So for this mold, I'm having to apply about 35 tons of pressure, and it is heated. So I have a temperature sensor and heaters here. So it needs to heat up around 150 all the way up to 190 degrees Celsius, and then have that 35 tons applied to it. And after that, I'm able to just pop out the piece. Here's an example. This one was a bit of a failure because of the cracks in the middle. That can happen for a bunch of reasons. I don't have great process control yet, so the temperature can vary, the pressure can vary, but every once in a while I get a few pieces that work, and they come together into objects like this, which the glue is actually still drying on this. So, yeah. But the working properties of it are pretty familiar to a lot of woodworkers. It's very hard. It's a little bit difficult to use because of how hard it is. Like if you try and use a chisel on it, it just takes a lot of effort. So the best processes for working with it are sanding or using a router. Those work great. You can cut it with regular saws, all of that kind of thing. You can press flatboards. If you want flatboards, you can press complex shapes. They're more likely to fail, so it's helpful to have an industrial designer. Yes, I'm securing my employment to figure out how to do that process. But yeah, if you have a reason to produce like 100 of an object, it starts to become worth it to machine the aluminum material. And yeah, I think that pretty much describes a lot of the process. If anyone has questions, I will take them. Yes.
You know, that piece you have kind of looks like it has a certain shape. Is that shaped? No, not the one.
Oh, this one.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this.
No, not that one. The stick.
The stick.
It looks 3 dimensions. No, the other one. The long. No, everything but the toes. Yeah. are, they're dyed.
Mhm.
Is that the actual natural cane shape or is?
That is the natural cane shape. So that five-sided star, it also tells you when this was harvested. So early in the season, you have these deep pits in the cane. And that's a sign that when you go and you crush it or you start pulling the skins off, it's going to go really well. It's going to slip off easily. Later in the season, those valleys start to fill out, and you'll start to see, like, this one is a good example. Once the walls start to flatten out or round out the other way, you're going to have a really frustrating time trying to harvest and process it. So yeah, that's where the shape comes from. I was going to say something else, but I lost my train of thought. But yeah.
So when you go to harvest them to take the center out, you've got to go after the younger shoots.
Yeah, so about like late August, September time is when it starts to get quite frustrating to process them. So up until that point in time, you're going to be able to get run the process really easily. What I've actually done is did a whole bunch of reading and found a bunch of suggestions for how to process them in the rest of the season. So that is a little bit more energy intensive, but basically what I do at that point is I will just throw them into a bath with citric acid. So you can buy citric acid at the store powdered. They have it at Famous Foods. And if you throw brambles into a pot of that at like 60 to 80 degrees Celsius, the skins will like become as if they're young plants. So I am actually able to run the process year round with just a little bit more energy usage. Yeah, did that answer all your questions?
Do you work for your apartment? Do you have a studio?
Uh,
Just imagine you with all this stuff.
I was working at home for a very long time, and it was very incompatible with regular life. When I started bringing home hydraulic presses, I needed a studio. So now, yeah, I'm working out of the studio at Clark and Pender. So that I do have open houses occasionally. I always appreciate seeing familiar faces. So to see some people again.
Free for the cultural crawl? Or do you open
Yes.
that?
Yeah. Once this table design is refined, it will be part of the culture call. And we will be making more of that. Yeah.
A couple questions. Are you open sourcing the procedure?
That is a really great question, and my heart is with open source, and my design teachers told me that the way to introduce a new material or a new look of something is to make it look luxurious. And so those two things are in conflict. How do I convince people that this is a high value material, not a throwaway material, not something that you dispose of in a year or less? It's better if you can keep it for 5 years or longer, because at that point, the process, all the energy you put into this material has started to pay off at 5 years in terms of the amount of carbon that you're locking away for that period of time. So typically, blackberry cane will grow for 1 year. It will, the second year, produce blackberries for eating. The third year, it'll maybe produce some blackberries, or it'll just start to become, like a support structure for all the other brambles. And then the fourth year, it's definitely no longer alive, and it starts to rot. And at that point, that's when it starts re-releasing all of the CO2 that it absorbed in its life. And so that's ideally sometime in there, we intervene, cut it, and turn it into something that could potentially last for 10 years or 20. And at that point, you start to be able to justify using all the energy and resources it takes to make the material.
Now leads to the other question. Do you see a way of performing these steps without, let's say, artificial energy input, using maybe things like drying in the sun or using a hand crank press or something?
The press is currently hand cranked, unfortunately. So yeah,
Heating and things like that.
I have this dream that instead of like gyms for people to work out, they just come and operate the press.
Sequestration.
Yeah, it's you're dealing with your carbon footprint at the same time. Yeah, I think there's a ton of potential there. So I've always wanted to go with human power. So this with a handle attached, you can crush the canes with just a set of rollers. I often resort to using a hand drill, which makes it a much faster process. Yeah, if you want to do weaving with the materials, you can do it yourself. You can do that crushing process. Yeah, and I'm definitely going to be open sourcing that thing once I make a version that it would just like cobble together. And I'm going to also be sizing it up to the point where potentially somebody could be pedaling it with a bicycle, or it could be hooked up to a solar panel or something like that, and then people can be harvesting canes and just putting them through the rolling process as you go. So that's kind of the bigger vision, is like, how do we make these like little like volunteer activities that are happening that have done amazing things, that have day-lit entire waterways? How do we like supercharge that a little bit more and like delve into the, delve into Vancouver and start running the process with not just Blackberry Brambles, but also English ivy and with knotweed and all of these different materials. They are creating all of this biomass, all of this material. And like, one of the projects that we referenced a lot at school was Michael Green architects, who have open sourced their ideas for like building massive skyscrapers out of wood again, but they're looking at using wood from trees. And like, again, where are we going to get that? How are we going to get that in a way that isn't causing harm? So maybe we're still getting it from trees, but then maybe instead of cutting down trees for our furniture, we cut down Blackberry Brambles instead for the furniture part. Or, I don't know, we gotta figure that out. Yeah, questions are very helpful.
Where do you source your materials from?
So right now, most of the material for this piece came from the Means of Production Garden. So that's at it's on Great Northern Bay, South China Creek Park. I've also sourced a lot from Still Creek, from a few different sites along Still Creek. If you've seen that picture of a beaver in our RV, I got a lot from there. That's a great site. Yeah.
You dig it yourself, or?
It's a combination. I have gotten a lot of Blackberry Bramble cuts, but then every once in a while I get a call from somebody and they're like, hey, we just cut more than you could ever cut yourself. I'm like, cool, okay, thanks.
I'm curious how much brambles it takes to make an object like that.
Yeah, so that's a great question. This probably weighs about 3 kilograms. So when you cut the brambles, they obviously are full of moisture. So as they dry, they go down to about a third of their weight or a quarter of their weight. And then you also have to separate the skins, and that takes away, again, like a third of that. So you're looking at harvesting probably about like 8 kilograms of fresh bramble to make this. Yeah, that's like, yeah.
How do you lose much in the process?
Sorry.
Do you lose very much in the process?
Yeah, so there's always some that you have to cut off from the ends. There's many offcuts that I have now because of the pretty curves that I was like, oh, this is worth doing. Earlier in the process, before it's dyed, that material I'm really hoping to connect to someone who's a paper maker. If anyone has a paper maker, I want to talk to them.
Mosaics,
Okay.
mosaic pieces
Yeah,
for those cutoffs.
for those cutoffs, yeah.
Yeah. Well, is the journal that people work with mosaics?
Yeah. I know a jeweler who has explicitly asked me to save some pieces like this because she wants to make jewelry pieces. I'm pretty excited about that.
How do you prevent it from warping, like from absorbing that water when it's a finished product?
So at this point, if I was to dunk it in water, it does not move very much because those pore spaces inside pretty much close to the point where water just doesn't flow very deeply into it. So if I dump this in water, it would come out and dry and pretty much be the same shape. It doesn't change very much. If I dumped it in water and left it overnight, it would fall completely to pieces. So if you really wanted to compost it, for some reason, it would be super easy.
You finish it with linseed oil or
Yeah.
beeswax?
Right now I've been finishing it with hemp oil, with beeswax, a couple other things. You get lovely color variations, different parts of the color come forward. Yeah.
So I'm interested in this. I really appreciated this very creative idea of using the Blackberry bush. Is there a story behind this when you experimented different materials and came to the idea that this would be it?
Yeah. Some of the other materials I tried were, I really wanted to figure out how to use Scotch broom. I was really excited about that because there's already an existing history of people making instruments out of Scotch broom in other parts of the world. I also recently connected with somebody on the island who runs island ivory, and he will make like wooden spoons and various other household objects out of Scotch broom. I thought Scotch broom was the way to go, and then I tried processing it, and it's because its variation in size is so great between the stem and the final branches, a rolling process like that one doesn't work very well with it because you start with a branch that can't bend, and then you get out to these very flexible parts at the end. The nice thing about Blackberry Brambles is they're pretty much continuous. They're the same size almost from end to end. And so that's one of the biggest reasons why brambles really became my focus. There's also like some personal stories about me figuring out what's my role as a settler here? What's my connection to these plants which come from Europe and the rest of the world and are coming here and causing all of these harms? What is my role as someone who, my grandfather was an engineer in this province and helped build the power lines that run between the hydro dams and the aluminum smelting factories. So that's a bit of the personal story. I'm trying to figure out what does all this mean to me. Thank you for the question.
So you came up with this process through trial and error on your own, or were you inspired by someone else who's doing this similar work, or are you kind of the only one?
So there are researchers in academia who, their work, I would not have figured any of this out without their work. So there are people who are figuring out how to make materials like these. They are looking for things that commercialize very quickly. And so they will do all of this research and create all of these papers, and they'll make a material where if you soak it in water for a day, it falls apart, and they say, oh, this could never work for home goods, this couldn't work for furniture. People would never buy something that could be destroyed just that easily. And so they never move forward with the process. They publish the paper, they say like, oh, this is, you know, we figured out it ends up with this strength, whatever it is. Say something else, what was it? There is a huge number of people that I really should figure out how to thank, because I customized the process. I made it work with local materials, with stuff that I could get my hands on. So I do feel like I did a little bit of tweaking and adding to the process, but basically everything is just from going to like Google Scholar and saying like, what did everyone do? And yeah, I should probably have a list of those people and just say all their names, but I did not bring it.
But those people weren't using Blackberry, you're saying there are other materials, or they gave up on Blackberry because it wasn't gonna be lasting if it was soaked in water.
Yeah.
You're the only one that you know of that's seen through using Blackberry specifically to make furniture, for example, like.
In a way like this, where I'm making wood, yeah.
That's really interesting.
Yeah. I think there's some really, really great processes you could engage with in basketry. I really think there's going to be huge potential there in creating gorgeous furniture, because that's something you get when you do a basketry approach, is it just becomes so like delicious to look at. But it's not really the way I think, not really the way I approach things. So I definitely don't think this is the only direction for figuring this stuff out, because like once you have the rolling machine, you're not just all going towards this. You have the rolling machine, and some people throw some brambles in there because they want to do a basketry process. Some people throw it through for a variety of different reasons. I'm also super excited about the idea of like customizing the shape of the brambles as they grow, because something that brambles do is if you like strip a bit of the skin away and push them together, they'll grow into each other. So like you could design a chair that was just a set of molds, and the bramble would grow into that shape. There's a designer, I don't have his name in my head, but I believe he's in France, who has been doing that with trees. So he's been taking trees, and his chairs will take about like 15 years to get to a size where they're strong enough to support someone sitting in them. I think you could probably figure out a design that would get you there a bit faster than 15 years, but yeah. It's all adding to this idea of like different approaches.
This seems at the very least like a better alternative than particle board, like what you buy at most furniture stores, which has that same flaw of falling apart in water.
Yeah.
This is much more eco-friendly.
Another issue with particle boards, because originally what I was working with was coming out really similar to particle board. But one of the problems that most have is that you get formaldehyde emissions from them. So anytime you make a home good out of them, you're starting to add to the indoor load of those kind of toxic materials. And that's one of the things I'm really excited about, is getting rid of the formaldehyde in the built environment. Because right now, the standard is that you can just put that into people's homes. And it's not great for us.
Did you figure out a glue system? I know you were researching that, what kind of glue to use that wasn't formaldehyde.
In terms of bonding the multiple pieces to each other.
Yeah, and also just the rolling process. Are there sort of alginates or something in there to help it bond?
So this has agar,
Yeah.
it has oxidized sucrose. Were you here when I covered that?
No, I missed that.
Okay.
Sorry, that's me being late.
Yeah, no, so a seaweed product, an oxidized sucrose, and just the tannins from the plant itself. In terms of bonding the pieces to each other, I have not worked that out yet, but there's a bunch of promising leads. One of the most mainstream types of glue that they're trying to move in from like the research, the small production phase to much more wide acceptance is soy-based foods. So they'll actually take the soy protein and react it with something, and it's quite water resistant, but the problem is that's a food plant. We could be eating that. I really, really want to get to the point where for something like this, the material is not coming from something that could be eaten otherwise. Yes.
I read somewhere, I don't remember what about it, but them making fiber out of mushrooms, but the same problem, right?
Yeah.
Mushrooms serve another purpose, and then, not harvest all the mushrooms. I mean, cardboard or something like that, something hard formed,
Yeah.
rock, you know, what. So, yeah.
Does it have to be the soybeans or can it be the soy plants and stems?
The stalks. I mean, if I was doing it, I would use the stalks, but
Can that be done?
it doesn't have enough protein in it. They really need that one component. Yeah, what was the other thing I was going to talk about? Oh, yes. So the one other idea I wanted to present, and then people are getting antsy, so maybe we'll take a body break after that. The one other concept I wanted to talk about is, as well as being a storage for carbon, physically locking it away so it's not in the atmosphere, there's also the fact that because there's no formaldehyde, because there's no added toxicity, because there's no petroleum products added, you can actually burn this like firewood. And so, you know, I go out to UBC every year and I see all of the IKEA furniture that the students move out of their dorm rooms onto the side of the road. And like, okay, they use that for 1 year and now they're done. They're a young person, they need to move on to the next thing in their life. We're always gonna have that as a social situation where people are figuring out who they are and changing their life radically. That could be a 1 year cycle, that could be a 5 year cycle, that could be 50 years into your life, you're like, I don't really want to live in a house anymore. I'm going to go do something else. And at that point, you can change up the situation and this could become firewood if nobody else has a use for it. And that's really exciting to me because it becomes a virtual battery. So what we've done is we've used a bunch of electricity in the process to make this material which is stable for 5, 10 years, hopefully. And then you take it to a specialized energy generating center, which there are many, many examples of ones that are able to minimize the air pollution that they put out through filters and things like that. And you burn it and you get back about 20% of the electricity that was used to make it in the first place. So 5 years of production could power 1 year of production in the future. And so like, you know, it's not fusion, you're not generating electricity for nothing, but it served a purpose while it was a solid material. And so yeah, that's the other idea that I'm really excited about, is that like, rather than approaching things as, okay, we're gonna cut a whole bunch of plants and just burn them immediately, why don't we cut a whole bunch of plants and do a bunch of stuff with it and get a bunch of use out of it, and then burn it after that, if we must burn things. So, yeah, that's the last idea I wanted to present. Thank you all so much, and I will take more questions, obviously, if you want.
So yeah, thank you so much, Sam, for your